Now, you know the real story about this?
And what's that?
You know this? Okay, so that opens the movie. That's the main thing.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't written.
Really?
Wasn't written when I did
Wow.
the score, and I wrote it last. I swear to God, I was this far from saying, "Fuck it, I'll just have," because what I had, I thought was great, but and then I just went up like that. I just oh shit. Anyway,
Mr. Edelman, if you wouldn't mind, could you tell us something about like your early life and how you got started with music and how you got into film scoring and all that?
oh well, okay. Music from a very young age, playing, serious classical music. I was a concert pianist. I was a young kid. So, went to Cincinnati Conservatory. But while I was there, I started doing some recording and writing arrangements. I didn't even know how to write a score page. I just wrote parts. And I'd take kids from the school and went to a studio. The name of this studio was King Records. If you knew anything about R&B music, you'd know that the big label was King Records. On that label were, among many people, Bobby Blue Bland and someone by the name of James Brown.
Very famous.
James Brown saw me, a young 15, 16-year-old kid, one day in that studio in a garbage dump in Cincinnati, Ohio. So in those days, if you wanted to go and put strings or an orchestra on something, and you were in Cincinnati, you either went to Chicago, where it was big time recording,
Right.
or, not Nashville, Memphis. Okay? So he sees this kid standing there, no shoes on, and conducting these kids from the school, and he says, well, like I was on, we could save a lot of money. So I got into this funny thing. I always loved show music and pop music besides classical music. So by the time I got out of school, I was very young. I came to New York, and I had a bag of tricks. You know what I mean? I had records
Right.
and scores for the Rose Tattoo and stuff. Okay, so, and also I was, very accomplished pianist. So I started working on Broadway. It was a plum job, playing in a bit of Broadway, and writing songs and taking songs around. I very quickly got into doing many different things. I went out on the road with very well-known singers, conducting in Vegas and stuff, and I was a young kid. So that's what was going on. And that was the period when the whole music business had changed, and whether it was Bob Dylan or the Beatles or the Eagles or James Taylor or Carole King, people selling records now suddenly went from the people who were singer performers to 90% of the people selling records wrote their own music. So if you were a songwriter, which I wasn't, and wanted someone to record your song, guess what? You had to do it yourself. So consequently, if you could carry a tune and write a pretty good melody, you could get a record deal. Now, I'm exaggerating, okay? So here's this young kid, and I also realized something. I mean, I was a great player, but I wasn't going to be winning the Van Cliburn competition. So I started making my own albums, and that's what I did for years. But also, I was fortunate. I did many things as a musician, always sticking with writing my own stuff. I never worked with anybody. Even writing songs, I wrote my own lyrics. Was I a lyricist? No, but I became a lyricist. Was I a singer? No, but I became a singer because I was doing these albums. And then, bit by bit, some really interesting people recorded my songs. Some became hits. The record companies it's like they started zeroing in on me writing, it's got to be commercial. So I started kind of down writing. I wasn't writing up better songs or more interesting songs. No, I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
I did plenty on those albums, but so it got kind of boring. Okay, So when you said you got into, first of all, no matter how great you are, you got to get a break. You got to get a little, it's called luck.
Yeah.
Okay. The luck happened when I was about 40 years old. Okay. I was the new kid in Hollywood. Nobody knew anything about. You'd say, well, hold it. You wrote these hit songs, you did these albums, yeah. But the Hollywood film community, I was the new kid in town. Okay? Meanwhile, I had a lot of experience doing stuff, which allowed me to like hit the ground running with a director by the name of Ivan Reitman. So I did Ghostbusters II and Twins and Kindergarten Cop and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, I was this guy doing these big pictures and did a lot of pictures and obviously was kind of pigeonholed. I wasn't writing the music I was writing for any of those things. Sounds like they're comedies. I wasn't writing funny music. I was writing dead serious music. Because when you write for a comedy, if it's a good comedy, and the person in the lead role, whether it's Jim Carrey or whoever it is, they don't need music. The person writing the score is writing the action, the romance, the mystery, the bad guys, you know what I mean? So, fortunately, I did that for a while, and then, of course, I wanted to branch out into more dramatic things. Now, that's easier said than done, and you could say, well, you should believe me. I'd been around. I was happy to be doing what I was doing. But it's not that easy to steer the ship to be able to do Last of the Mohicans at Dragonheart and Gettysburg, and, you know, so that took a while. But what I'm saying is all this is everything I did was like a culmination of things and a culmination of being very experienced in a lot of areas that you had to be experienced in because of the technology changing to score films. You couldn't just be a great musician. You got to be able to be fast. Be two things. You have to be fast and right. You can't look at something or write something, oh, I wrote it in 3 seconds. Yeah, but the music is completely wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you can't be taking a long time and then say, so these are things. So all the nuances, working with orchestras after conducting in Vegas, doing a TV show like a show called MacGyver that I had to write 47 minutes of music overnight. You know.
Really? Was it actually overnight?
Okay. I quit. I literally had a nervous breakdown.
That's crazy.
I laugh now. Wasn't funny. Because, so what I just told you, so I was used to doing everything. So when this opportunity came up, and I had done other TV shows, and I loved doing it. I remember driving in my car down the canyon in LA and saying, I could do this for the rest of my life. That's it. And I was doing a show, it was an hour show, with the normal amount, maybe 8 or 9 minutes of original music. Now, 8 or 9, and you had a week to write it, let's say. That's one thing. MacGyver, they wanted Indiana Jones. It was an hour show. That means there's 13 minutes for commercials and 47 minutes of film. They needed 45 minutes of Indiana Jones. Whoa, what do you mean? Yeah. You could say it's nuts, and it is, but nobody cares. It's a steamroller. The network. So I couldn't. And here I am. I'm orchestrating, playing. By that time, you learned a little about electronics. Playing my Jupiter 8 and my, Well, it just overwhelmingly. I finally got an orchestrator. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you gotta. Yeah. But how do you do it? You need 15 guys in the back room, and that's how it's done. And that's not a put down to anyone doing it. You have to have it. You can't churn that amount of music. It doesn't even forget about the quality. Just the 47. So after doing that, because this can sound funny, having that experience, and I was freaked out. It's the first time in my life I quit. Nobody quits a network show at a certain point in your life. I hadn't started scoring.
It sounds like a good job.
Well, it's the best job because of the performances.
Yeah.
But it's, so I couldn't keep up with it. So eventually I quit. I had written the theme, and the show was going on. Everybody hated the show when we did the pilot. Never believed that it would ever go on, but it was, and then it went on for like a billion years. So so I quit that, and I said to myself, you know what? You're not meant to write music for a picture. Go back to writing your songs. Now, this is funny. 2 or 3 years later, I was like the hottest composer in the world. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, hold it. How did that happen?
Right.
Well, that's too long, but something happened, and I was able to pull it off, and then blah 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 led to other things. But so that's kind of what happened. Many years of of doing everything all over the world, concerts, conducting, everything to lead to be able to have the ability to score films. Now, you probably know, you don't have to mention any names, but some of the hottest guys now, they don't even know how to write a note, read a note music. That's okay. That's a technology. I won't mention like 2 names. You know who they are. Does that mean they're not brilliant? No, they are brilliant. But they come about it from a different place. Gettysburg was a mini-series made by a guy named Ted Turner. It was the first thing he ever made. After CNN, he started a network called TNT. This is when it was in its infancy.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Okay, and he's a Civil War buff. That's a whole story in itself, this guy. Amazing guy. Now, the reason they called me is because they tempted, not Ted Turner, he didn't know the difference between me and Bach, he didn't know anything. The director and the music editor tempted with Last of the Mohicans, a particular piece that I wrote for that. Really sad. And every time a thing, and Ted Turner said, like, who wrote that? And he didn't know if the guy that wrote that music is dead, alive, wrote it in 1700. He didn't know a thing about music. It was a kind of a quiet orchestral thing. So that was me. So they called me, and I said, geez, what is it, a miniseries? And not only, it wasn't even a miniseries for like that time, the networks. It was a miniseries for TNT. What's that? Well, that's this new spin-off thing from CNN. Ooh, how much? Oh, there's like 8 episodes. Are you crazy? How much is the budget? Like 3 cents. No budget. That's why people's beards are on a little backwards in that movie. Okay, I know you love it. So I said no. Then I went to dinner that night at an Indian restaurant with a friend of mine. And he says, what are you doing? I said, I'm doing this and that. And I said, oh, they asked me to do that. He said, oh, they asked you to do what? I said, this Gettysburg. He said, you got to do it. Ted Turner, this is his big project. I said, I don't care if it's his big project. It's this, that, and the other. He says, you know what? Now, I knew who Ted Turner was. I knew that he had won the America's Cup. I also knew that he lived on a cot for 20 years. People don't realize this. This guy lived in this warehouse for 20 years talking about a news network. What? Nobody ever. You can't do that. Yeah. What are people going to just watch the news? They can hardly listen on the radio. So I went out to the beach. It turned out, so I called my agent back or something. I said, okay. It turned out, it was just by chance that he and at that time his wife, Jane Fonda, were in L.A. for the Oscars or something. And I went out and I met him. And there's no way, after I was with this guy in the room, jumping up and down on his couch with his Civil War thing, that I was going to say, sorry, man, I can't do your project.
Was he
it's
that,
not
like,
that he
serious about
Oh,
it,
he was
Civil
serious
War thing? Oh, man.
and
Okay.
excited. He's an
Yeah.
excitable guy.
Mm.
He didn't offer me any more money. He didn't say, and the director was there.
Ron F. Maxwell.
Ron is kind of a historian type. He's not a real director. Really nice guy. And Ted Turner kept saying, oh, this is not, we're going to make this into a feature. And you saw Ron Maxwell going, oh, yeah, you can't make it. We shot it as a episodic thing. But he's going on. Anyway, finally I said yes. And wrote 18 hours of music very quickly. I mean, in the scheme of that, it wasn't a couple of days.
How long was it?
That I had to write it? Well, I wasn't given, it had to be done by a certain amount of time. I'd say 6 weeks I did it in, which is...
That's fast.
Yeah. So, but I was doing something. I was doing other things. So, I did it, and then, and went up, because no money, we went up to Salt Lake, non-union in a little church. I thought I was going to the Mormon Tower, that place where there's a big thing, you see it on. No, I was by the railroad tracks in a little church.
Seriously.
Yes, with players from the Utah Symphony. Did that, blah, 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 put it in there, and then Ted Turner had some kind of screening. Oh, no, Ted Turner heard the music, and I went down to Georgia, and they had some kind of screening of just the first part, and he said, that's it, this is a feature film. Well, when it's a feature film, it's like it's too long, it's not, like you can't just say. I mean,
Yeah.
okay, so what does Ted Turner do? He goes to Miramax, the notorious Harvey Weinstein. They laughed him out. They laughed him out of the place. And then he went to a company called New Line, and you know what he did? He bought New Line to release Gettysburg as a feature, and they cut it down and released it as a 3.5 hour feature. Anyway, that's what happened with that. Right away when I did the music, and I put it together with a little French soundtrack company, there was interest in it, because people like the Civil War. So that's the story. I mean, it wasn't a successful feature film, but the music has gone on and it's used for all kinds of things. But the kind of post PS of the story is, so he buys New Line. Okay, now Ted Turner owns New Line. This is before New Line went with Warner Brothers. They're just this little company. They had a couple of good things. They had a little film that I ended up scoring at the time. I got another one for no one called The Mask with Jim Carrey. I did it all with an orchestra, an opera orchestra in Ireland. You say, why'd you go there? I went there. And by the time Gettysburg was coming out, this picture, The Mask, was a monster picture. And how did Ted Turner get The Mask? He bought New Line, who owned it. And so, I was like a big hero. Just like he says, I wouldn't have had this big hit if it wasn't for Randy, because I released Gettysburg as a feature once I heard Randy's score. I can't explain it. They just heard it. They saw it at the beginning. And then this thing, now when I go around now, which I do very infrequently, and do this with the Boston Pops or something like that, and you get to... And what is this? It's a little thing called a Proteus that I'm playing. Dong, dong, it's a guitar.
Okay.
So now, in some, they always have a guitar player. We can do this. They always fuck it up, so I give it to the clarinet. And the only way you get that sound is to go back to Proteus, which hasn't been made in 25 years. If you listen to the thing, listen to what that is. That's me on this little thing. It's not a real guitar.
Wow, because it sounds good.
It sounds great because it's a unique sound.
Yeah, interesting.
It's an electrified, it's something, and it's that thing. And it's a factory sound, by the way.
So about that famous theme there, was there any inspiration for the style of music that you wrote for the film? Because it sounds there's a lot of modality and was there any sort of
No, I never. No, there's never. No,
there's
no,
never
no,
an inspiration
nothing,
or anything like
about
that.
anything, any style. If I do, I get a lot of martial arts stuff. No, it's what I think it should be, and then I know in my head whatever that flavor is. And a lot of people put that down, Gettysburg, and I always laugh because there seems to be. It's a lot of synthy stuff in there. Yeah, that's what it is.
Okay.
Did I have a real orchestra doing the whole? Yeah, but I also have that stuff, and that gives it a certain, like it or not. That's what.
So you used the synth on purpose, not just because you were being low budget on it.
No, not at all. No, I did all my stuff like that. Whether
because that's a common misconception. People look down on Hollywood because they have that kind of sound or whatever, but it's actually
my thing is now I just did a really cool score for a horror movie that's all me. But the writing is exactly the same as if I had a real orchestra. Now that, yes, didn't have the budget for a big orchestra, but it doesn't matter because then you know what you're writing for. Then you kind of do certain things. It was better this way. I mean, the way that I just did it, rather than having it, this kind of big. So yeah. I mean, and I'm a keyboard player, so I always have a blast. It's part of my writing. I'm programming the synths as I'm writing the cue.
Really?
It's the same thing. I don't do it like I wrote the whole score and then I went back and I sequenced all the parts. No, I sequenced 50 parts for a 15-second cue if I have to. It's just part of that. That's my method. Now, I didn't know anything about synthesizers or electronics. I came late in the scheme of things to it, but once, it's fun.
Well, obviously learned as you went.
Yeah, I learned as I went, exactly.
What was it like working with Ron F. Maxwell? Like, did you ever feel like there was like an agenda he was pushing with the movie, or like?
Well, yeah, there's always an agenda. Director, the composer is always, especially in this case, the composer is making a tremendous contribution to a movie, and yet he's not part of the family. You come in late, last. Now, all of these pictures, doesn't matter if it's Gettysburg, which sounds important, or a stupid comedy, they've got maybe a 20-year history. They bought a book, they tried to get it going, the studio put it in turnaround, this star dropped out. It's unbelievable. Has nothing to do with the quality or whatever it is. In this thing, Maxwell couldn't get anybody to make. Everybody turned this down. Who's that good actor? He's a very famous older actor, Robert Duvall. He was supposed to be the lead, whatever it is, and then for a couple of years, then he backed out, and then everything dropped out. Blah, blah, blah. And then Ted Turner was the last guy on the block after maybe 10 years to get the book. The book's not called Gettysburg. The name of the book is Killer Angels.
Yeah, I read it.
It's a little book, by the way. It's not a big book, right? Ted Turner was the last guy on the block, and he never made a movie. But he had this idea about turning the CNN thing into making original things.
He was a bit of a dreamer, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and when I came into it, and Maxwell knew that I didn't really, not that I was such a big shot, it was just the way it was presented to me. And I just gotten to the point after Mohicans had been nominated for a Golden Globe and all that stuff, and all these records that somehow my soundtrack sold from Les and Mohicans was like triple platinum. With what? Why? There's no song, that's like unheard of. Like, why? Well, there was the thing. And Gettysburg, when we did it. So was it that I wanted to do it? And then once I met Turner, and saw that main title done to the Enigma, what's that part of the Enigma variations? That less, what's it called? That beautiful, it's the name of a ship. It's a movement, and they tempt it with that, and it was like, whoa. Then I said, got to do it, because you don't get that kind of opportunity to just like jerk off and write.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Because it was just like pictures of guys. Now some composers would say, "Oh my God, what am I going to do for like 8 minutes at the beginning with nothing going on?" No, so I did, but I didn't do that first. I came up with that at the end.
So you said so much about how you got into the world of film scoring and all of that. It sounds like a very gradual process. For you, do you have any advice for anybody who's looking to get into the business? Like, is there anything that you would tell them that you wished you knew at the time? Or
No.
Like that? No.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
You better be a fucking great musician.
Okay.
And you better get your chops together. Mm-hmm. There is everybody has a different thing. Everybody has a different way in. You better have your shit together. Okay. Now, what people are doing, and this is maybe applies to you, I go very infrequently. It doesn't matter where I go to the Berkeley thing, which isn't really they don't even have an orchestra, but it started as a jazz school years ago, or USC or any of these places, and they're studying film composition. What the fuck is that all about? No, study orchestrations.
Right.
Be proficient. If it's a trombone or a guitar or a piano, be like brilliant on your instrument. That's one thing. Know everything about, that you have to have that. Now, you may find there may be somebody you could find, oh, so-and-so's doing it, but you don't know about so-and-so. You don't know how they came up or what they know about. So, like I said, these days, nobody has my background. The only one in town that has my background is like John Williams, who's like older school, but people don't, if I'm using an orchestra, there's no conductor, I'm the conductor. I wouldn't even think about. I've had directors say, well, how come you're not in the booth with me? When I worked with James and Howard, because I'm out with a guy. I'm doing my thing.
Right.
There isn't a conductor.
You actually know what you're doing.
I know, yeah.
Yeah.
Now that's not. It's just because that's what my background is. So yeah, and that's I don't even think about it. I would think about somebody else out there. That means how then do you make the corrections when you hear, oh, that's someone else making it? No, I'm making the corrections because I heard that something was wrong in the parts. I mean, I have nobody really has my story, my exact story. I mean, it's a different thing because everybody uses one thing and then the other, or they don't do both. And this is the way it's, what the hell am I doing here? I'm doing here tonight the story of my life. Did I plan it that way to be doing a 2-hour thing? No, but when I play all these things, I'm playing stuff that I wrote for my first album, and I'm playing stuff I recorded yesterday. You know what I mean? But it's all put together. So it wasn't meant to be that, but that's basically what it is. Because my life, my story, my soundtrack, all these people do things, they have the soundtrack. My soundtrack is my shit. Whether anybody else knows it or not, I don't care. That's so like when I do this. So over the years, because of my success in England, I did do things because I had these hit records. So big concerts in like Royal Festival Hall and Drury Lane Theater. So I have done over the years. It's not the first time I've come out and sung. But so it's sort of been there, but I didn't focus on it. And now I'm having some fun. And now, none of these places, like a place like this, isn't ideal. Basically, why are people drinking and eating? Okay, that's no good. Yeah. But then you try to find venues, and then you find like Lincoln Center jazz thing that's too big until something happens and I can fill it. So you can't, these venues, or even play like they want the Carlisle, that's too, a little, it's just like, so, but I'm having fun doing this. I've done it for the last year and a half. I go to England but I'm not doing it. I just do it for myself. I'm not doing it for any other reason. But it's kind of cool. And what I do, I play. This is all about my playing. And nobody else, people get up and they'll sing songs and they play okay, or they play guitar. But for 2 hours I'm playing and I don't get up.
So it sounds like all that you've written and all that you do music-wise is part of you and like a natural outflow of what you feel.
Oh, absolutely,
not,
yeah.
Like,
I never
inspired by the style or other. Or
No. First of all, no. Yeah. Everything that I've done, whether it's a song or a film score it all comes from. That's where it comes from. It's all of my. It's never like I just look at something. Oh, all right. So no, I try to make it, and if that doesn't happen, it doesn't feel right. I don't move on. And you have to move on, especially in film scoring. So that's what I do, right. I'll find something that, whatever it is, and I think I said, the comedy is the hardest thing to write for. A drama, a mystery, an action film dictates itself what to do. Yeah. But comedies, that's not only what is the music, where is the music? And when you're dealing with some of these really talented people that I've worked with, as far as not just directors, but the actors, if they've got their shit together and they're really good, like Jim Carrey was at the beginning, or Eddie Murphy was at the beginning, these people are great. They're brilliant at what they do. They don't need music. The other parts of the thing need music. So when I'm doing a really little comedy, which no one cared about, that's the most loved movie there is now, called My Cousin Vinny. Yeah. what did I do to that? It was about two people from Brooklyn, but it takes place in the South. So what did I do? I wrote the scenery. I wrote the South. And in that, made the picture really work. But it didn't have to do, some of it was fun, but it was all Southern. Nothing had to do with Joe Pesci or Marisa Tomei as far as who they were, their Brooklyn accents. And so I wrote, that's the exercise I gave myself. And in doing that, the music was never going to be, oh, that music's great. That's not the, it's that, and it made, it just, I mean, I'm not the one that should say this, but it made that picture right from the beginning, and that whole thing set up. What does that have to do with? It's about these kids that robbed tuna fish can, and now they're being accused of murder, and they have a cousin who's just got out of law school and is coming down to vet. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with where they are, and that made it funny.
I think I better let you go, but it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much. I will get out of here. Thank you.
All right.